Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Ari Witten, and today I have with me Dr. Daniel Stickler, who is the visionary pioneer behind the human potential medicine movement, a shift away from the disease model to limitless peak performance in all aspects of life. Dr. Stickler is a physician to high-performing entrepreneurs who want to optimize their performance. He is also an author, speaker, blogger, and host of the Ironman Executive podcast. Dr. Stickler is an expert in the use of genetics and epigenetics in clinical practice and trains healthcare clinicians from all over the world in the interpretation of genomic data for optimizing human potential. Dr. Stickler also works with each client to develop personalized human potential optimization plans based on genetics, quality of life factors, and the 7 foundational aspects of health. He also serves as the medical director of Neurohacker Collective. So welcome, Dr. Stickler. Such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Ari. Great to be here.
Excellent. So I want to talk to you about, well, you have a wide range of expertise that we could talk about a whole bunch of things, but specifically I want to talk to you about peptides. And then if we have any time left over, I'd love to talk to you about some of the things I just mentioned in your bio there as far as how you use genomic data and to optimize people's health and that sort of thing. So first of all, let's get into this topic of peptides, which I know that you have been a pioneer in and you're an expert in. Can you give people sort of a general introduction to this topic of peptides? Like, what are peptides for people that have never heard of them? People have no idea what this whole class of compounds really is.
Yeah, I've been speaking quite a bit on the peptides and surprised at the number of people who really are unaware of it. I thought that this would be a topic that a lot of people would be jumping on, especially in the medical community, because peptides are in a class called biologics, and biologics are really the new order of medicine. This is going to very quickly replace pharmaceuticals and even most nutraceuticals in that regard, just because of the fact that it is so on target with what it does. So biologics are essentially things like, I guess, stem cells can be classified as biologics. A lot of recombinant DNA type products are biologics, but peptides are kind of in a new area of this, but they've been around since, probably the late 80s, I would say. And there's over 7,000 of these currently in research, but they are just strings of amino acids. So just kind of like our body makes proteins, it makes it out of amino acids. When that amino acid chain is less than 50 amino acids long, they call it a peptide. It's an arbitrary thing, but proteins are usually over 200 and polypeptides are somewhere in between there, but it's arbitrary. It's just a string of amino acids. So it's something the body actually recognizes. To differentiate like a molecule, a pharmaceutical versus a biologic. Biologics are kind of recognized by the body, and they go in and they hit a specific target in the body. That's what they're designed to do. And there's very little collateral effect with the biologics versus pharmaceuticals, where you get a lot of off-target hits. You get a lot of side effects from that aspect. That's what I really love about peptides, is they are highly specific. I mean, this is a laser approach to precision wellness for sure.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So there's a whole bunch of different classes of these peptides, and it sounds like with 7,000 different compounds currently in research, there's probably a lot more than what I'm about to list off. But general classes, I know there's peptides that relate to weight loss. There's growth hormones, secretagogues, things that promote the body's own natural production of growth hormone. There's peptides related to, I know there's one called tesamorelin related to visceral fat loss in people with HIV. It's FDA approved. And there's nootropic and brain health related peptides. There's anti-aging peptides. There's what else? Healing and recovery related peptides. So what other classes of peptides do you think are worth mentioning there?
Well, there are a ton of them, like you said. I mean, with 7,000 in currently known, and I think there's over 1,000 in clinical trials right now. But right now, I think we have 60 that are approved by the FDA. And you'll see them in weight loss, in soft tissue repair and gut healing, and autoimmune conditions. You see them in anti-cancer therapies, which are really coming on strong right now. You see them in the longevity world, even in sexual function peptides that are just blowing the other medications out of the water with their success. We have hair and skin peptides. There's a new hair peptide that is changing the whole landscape of hair replacement for sure. This stuff is incredible, and it's just a pathway that was identified back in November. So it's
Wow.
a very new one, and people are getting amazing results with hair regrowth in areas that had no follicles at all before.
Oh, wow.
So we're seeing quite a range of actions that can be achieved with the peptides, because they're essentially leveraging the body's own ability to do things and taking it to higher levels for sure.
Excellent. So within that, a few specific topics I want to dig into in depth, probably for this whole podcast or close to it. Longevity related peptides. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, because I know, I don't know about the whole range of them, but certainly with one of them called Epitalon, I know that there's some mixed data and sort of controversy around mechanisms and how it's actually working and if it works. And so I'm very curious to hear about sort of the current state of knowledge around longevity and anti-aging related peptides.
Yeah, we generally, it depends on what you're trying to target with this. Now, what you're talking about with Epitalon was it's a 4 amino acid long, so it's a really short little peptide, just 4 amino acids. But it was isolated by Dr. Kavinson at the University of St. Petersburg in Russia, and he did 2 very large scale studies. Well, not very large, but they were long studies, 6-year and 12-year studies on elderly patients. So they were, I think, between 70 and 90 years old in this group, and they had just unbelievable outcomes with this. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I kind of question, the research, because it's almost too good to be true. And what I know of Dr. Kavinson from people that have spoken about having worked with him and everything, he's very meticulous with his data. The Russians are not the most ethical with studies and selection, but they are like the Germans when it comes to accuracy of their results and being very precise with everything. So I'm inclined to believe it, and I've actually seen very positive results in clients that have used Epitalon in my medical practice. So it's one of those ones, though, you take, and most people just don't feel anything overt when they're taking it, and you typically run 2 cycles a year for about 20 days, and that's it. And you just rely on what it's doing in the system. But it's got anti-tumor properties. It improves glucose utilization. It upregulates the glutathione and antioxidant systems. There was one aspect of the study that looked at telomeres, and they saw between 16% and 33% increase in telomere length. And remember, this is 70 to 90-year-old people. They had like 8 times the improvement in physical performance activities, and they had subjective well-being changes in these groups. And this is a lot of what we see with our clients. 80% increase in bone density, 28% lower overall mortality in the group that was on it versus not. I mean, there's something with this stuff that's really creating a great outcome. And like I said, it's a 4 amino acid peptide. So for me, I'm kind of taking it on faith that it's working. And we do some measurements. So we do epigenetic age markings with my DNA age, and that's going to be kind of our metric to see how this is doing, to watch the dynamic of where our epigenetic age comes out. And I like that better than telomeres. Telomeres are just too vague, and a lot of variability in the results that you get, even with places like life length, which is they look at the shortest percentage of telomeres, which if you're going to get telomeres, it's a place to get it. But I really like epigenetic age, because you can see over short-term improvements in what your aging is in that regard.
Okay. Now, if they're not measuring telomeres, what specifically are they measuring there?
In the epigenetic age, what they did, Dr. Horvath, I think he's out of UCLA. It's either UCLA or Stanford, but he took a bunch of metrics that we use to assess age, like albumin levels and liver function studies, and just a whole bunch of biomarkers, and said, okay, let's line these people up and let's see where they are from all these biomarkers. Let's compare that to what we see as far as the methylation patterns on DNA. So as we get older, we tend to change what genes are methylated, so essentially turned off. And they measured this in white blood cells, and now they can look at that, and they have pretty darn good accuracy with predicting what your physiologic age is relative to your chronologic age. And that changes over time. So you can actually have somebody that will reverse age essentially from a epigenetic mark standpoint. And that's usually based on some intervention that you've done. And that's what we're using in our clinical practice as one of the metrics for aging.
Interesting. Now, is that something that you guys do in-house, or is that a lab that is another laboratory that does that kind of testing that you send out to?
Yeah, actually, this is available to the general public. It's just called My DNAge, and we actually have it in our store. It's I think it's around a $300 test, and you have to do a finger stick, send that into the lab, and it takes 6 to 8 weeks to get back. Okay. But if you go to Apeiron.store, you can grab yourself a kit and send it in.
Okay. Now, going back to Epitalon, I know that I've seen some controversy around the telomere length issue specifically. Some people sort of debate whether that is actually one of the mechanisms of how it works. And do you know anything about that?
When it comes to how something works, I mean, aging is a complex process. It's not as simple as, let's add telomere length. I mean, you look at Liz Parrish from BioViva. I mean, she infected herself with a virus that was tagged with telomerase, and she was able to reverse age her telomeres by 20 years. And she's going through evaluations at Harvard to really see her metrics to see how much of an impact that had. But my guess is it's going to have a small impact because there are so many things involved in the aging process. And I'm in the camp that believes that we are programmed to age by our genetics. Our DNA is programmed to age over time. And so we have things that happen. So we get cellular senescence. So we get these zombie cells that are taking up resources and secreting toxins that just won't die. And we've got to somehow force them to die. So you see a whole new kind of field of senolytics coming out. And there's some pretty impressive senolytics coming onto the market that are going to have an impact. You have things like mTOR inhibitors. So this is why a lot of people take metformin to reduce their aging. So if we can reduce that, we can hit some aspects of aging. Some of them are actually using rapamycin, which is an immunosuppressant that's used in kidney transplant patients. But there are two aspects of mTOR. There's the really healthy aspect that promotes longevity, and then there's the other aspect of it that causes immunosuppression. So right now, the developers in the market are looking for the way to specifically target only the one piece without getting immunosuppression. And I think there's a couple that are getting ready to come on the market for that. So we have that, and then we have the telomere lengtheners. But there are so many mechanisms that are going to go into reverse aging. Trying to get rid of ages in the body, the advanced glycation end products, another piece of the puzzle. We can't just look at one thing and say this is going to make a difference. Now, Epitalon, what's it doing? We don't know. I mean, that's one of the problems with peptides is because they cannot really be patented. There is a lot of difficulty in getting people to do the research on them. Pharmaceutical companies are funding most of the research, so they're like, well, we can't patent it, so no sense in doing it. There's one of the neurologic peptides called dihexa, which is amazing. We'll talk about it, but it was developed out of the University of Washington. A pharmaceutical company kind of bought it up, and they had great results with it, but they can't patent it. So they're trying to figure out ways to modify it in some way that creates it as a patentable drug. Mm-hmm. even though it's very effective the way it is, they can't really sell it for, disease model stuff where they can make money. So
Yeah.
that's why you don't see a lot of research in the area of peptides. It's not financially rewarding for people to research it.
Interesting. I have one more question on Epitalon, and then I want to go on to maybe some other anti-aging or longevity peptides. The study you mentioned, you said was in 70 to 80 or 70 to 90-year-olds?
One of them was like 70 to 80-year-olds, and the other one was 80 to 90, I think. And I can't remember if it was the 6-year or the 12-year study, which was the older group.
Okay. Do you think that this peptide is more suitable for use in somebody who is already, up there above 70, let's say, as opposed to, somebody who's in their 30s or 40s?
But to me, it's even more so indicated in that group, because that's the group that the study was actually done on. And I mean, if you're talking about 28% lower mortality rate in the group that got it, I mean, that's pretty substantial. But not only that, is the functionality of that group increased. So
Yes.
it's not a matter of just delaying your death. It's actually giving you healthier years of life, which is really the ultimate goal. I mean, it doesn't matter how long you live; it matters how long you can live and be functional and healthy. And I think it's an ideal piece of that. Now, I have a lot of people that are using it that are even in their early 30s, just because they feel like it has that potential to really mitigate aging in the early stages.
Yeah. I did see one, I did a podcast with Jean-Francois Tremblay. I don't know if you know him.
Out of Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. I just recorded this podcast a few days ago, actually. And he was talking about a lot of positive research around Epitalon, but then he also mentioned there's a study, I think it's a rat study that's currently in progress and that's not yet published, but somehow maybe he knows the researchers or something like that. And he said the data right now doesn't look good, and that more of the rats on the Epitalon are actually dying earlier compared to the other group. I'm just curious if you also know anything about that. He did say, we should wait till the sort of the study completes and we have the full picture of the data, but I'm just curious if you know anything about that.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of that study, and a lot of the naysayers are saying, well, you have a human study, why not do another human study? You have 2 human studies that show positive outcome, and we can use rat studies to give us, or animal studies in general, to give us ideas of things to look at, but we've seen many animal studies that had a complete opposite outcome, like pterostilbene. Pterostilbene was great in rat studies for lowering cholesterol and doing all these great things in the body. And then we looked at the human studies on it, and all of a sudden it was like jacking LDL through the roof. And even at Neurohacker, we pulled pterostilbene from the formulation because of those studies coming out that indicated problems on the human side of it. Even in the peptide studies, there's a weight loss peptide called AOD, advanced obesity drug, which was amazing with rats losing fat weight when they got this, and it was blowing people out of the water. I mean, that's why they called it AOD, for advanced obesity drug. And then in human trials, it had zero effect on the humans in the trials. Now, I have people that tell me that they get good results with AOD, or another kind of version of it is called Frag 176. And a lot of the bodybuilders swear by it, but I see maybe a 50-50 outcome with AOD. And, there's another example of a really outstanding animal trial that just didn't translate into the human trials very well.
Interesting. So are there any other compounds worth mentioning as far as anti-aging or longevity peptides?
Well, certainly the growth hormone releasing hormones and the ghrelin hormones. I mean, IGF-1 or growth hormone is kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to longevity. You read things about, the people with the highest levels have the highest mortality, and the people with the lowest levels have the highest mortality. So, you're mixed in outcomes. The problem, I think, is that we've been measuring the wrong marker. We've been measuring IGF-1, and I was in the anti-aging world way back in 2005, and growth hormone was a big component of that. So, all this anti-aging stuff came around for growth hormone. Then we realized that, we were creating more problems than it was creating positive outcomes. So a lot of people started stepping away from growth hormone. And now the peptides have come online with the growth hormone releasing hormones. And what we kind of came to the realization was that that system is so complex that we had to take that complexity approach with it, because we were looking at it as, okay, well, the hypothalamus releases growth hormone releasing hormone, and then growth hormone's released, and then the growth hormone circulates, goes to the liver, produces IGF-1, that goes out and causes anabolic effects in all these different cells, in bone and muscle and everything. What we neglected to pay attention to is that growth hormone releasing hormone, growth hormone, and IGF-1 all have receptors throughout the body. It's not just in the brain area or the liver area. And even measuring serum IGF-1 levels doesn't tell us what the local IGF-1 level is inside of muscle. And if you have growth hormone or growth hormone releasing hormones circulating around and activating muscle, you're going to get the muscle producing growth hormone inside of it, and IGF-1 as well. And then IGF-1 will actually be released, feedback on itself on that same cell and stimulate the cell. So the system is not as simple as everybody thought it was. And now we're starting to see combinations of growth hormone releasing hormone with the addition of ghrelin stimulators. So ghrelin is another product of that. I think those are very potent in the anti-aging world, just because it creates such anti-fragility in the human system. It promotes good bone health, good muscle development. It reduces body fat. It has very positive effects on cholesterol and cognitive function. It improves sleep qualities. So all these things that actually translate into very positive outcomes with it.
Now, so what is the current sort of state of understanding, having said that there's a lot of complexity there, and it's not just as simple, let's say, as was thought 20 years ago, where they said, oh, growth hormone is anti-aging, let's just inject lots of growth hormone. What's the current state of thinking as far as the use of these growth hormones secreting or secretagogues, growth hormone secretion promoting peptides that are on the market, and the role that they may have in anti-aging? And one more maybe nuance that I'll add to that is it necessarily that they're thinking that this is going to extend lifespan and longevity, or is it more about extending health span and having more energy and more vitality and more muscle mass and leanness and things like that?
Yeah, and that's the big debate. I mean, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. You age, and part of the aging process is a reduction in hormones. I mean, that's programmed into our DNA. We lose hormones as we age. And is that necessarily a healthy aspect of aging? No. And our bodies will lose their ability to surveil the immune system. So our immunity goes down. We're just programmed to die. I mean, that's the nature of it. I think aging is a disease, and we need to approach it that way. And these are aspects that promote kind of keeping the system in that resilient and anti-fragile state, for sure. That said, I would not put out there that we're looking for increased longevity, but we are looking at this as increased health span, for sure. There are things coming that are going to be definitely in the longevity world that are going to substantially increase lifespan, but we've got to also maintain the health span as well.
Okay. Now, do you think it's possible that playing with hormones in this sort of way, where let's say take a 50 or 70-year-old and have them, put them at the testosterone and growth hormone levels of a 20-year-old, do you think that there's a high potential there for pro-aging, for accelerating the aging process, or maybe promoting cancer or anything like that?
No, I think that just the opposite, actually. I think we're seeing a much better outcome. I mean, we already went through that phase of, testosterone causes prostate cancer. And, that debate went on for years, and multiple lawsuits, multiple debates by different experts in the field. We've finally come to the conclusion testosterone does not cause prostate cancer. And in fact, there's some people suggesting it might actually be protective from it. What we do know, and I do a lot of work in genetics and epigenetics, is that hormones have very potent impacts on gene expressions, and in a very positive way. So you think about the human system as a biologic system. I mean, ignore the fact that, you know, you've got a soul or whatever it is, and we're looking at it from some religious context or anything like that. We're a biologic system. And when is that biologic system the most optimized for performance? And what is happening in that system when that occurs? And to me, I look at it and I say, well, you know, the reproductive male and the reproductive female, the ones that are at the peak of their reproduction potential, are really optimized for physical function, for cognitive function, for just resilience in all aspects. And that comes about not just because of the hormones, but the hormones' effects on the genes themselves. And this expression change is pretty profound. I mean, even estrogen by itself, estrogen is one of the most potent epigenetic modifiers of any of the hormones. So we do know that the modification of gene expression is very, very much potentiated by the hormones. So my feeling, and again, it's a personal feeling, but I see people that are hormone deficient, and I see people who are optimized in hormones, and I can tell you from a functional standpoint, there's no comparison.
As far as the people on the hormones are just superior, basically, in terms of mood, energy levels.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's ironic that they call it performance enhancement like it's a bad term. You know, testosterone is performance enhancement. And who doesn't want performance enhancement? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a bad term when it comes to athletics, but why would you not want performance enhancement of your human system?
Yeah, absolutely. You know. Yeah. So you think there is a pretty significant role for some of these growth hormones, secretagogues, as far as increasing health span?
I do, because we're not, you know, even with these, we're not going to get into super physiologic doses. That's the great thing about peptides, is they self-regulate. You can overdose all you want. You can do like crank it up to high levels, and what happens is you just downregulate receptors. The body knows this stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, when we're giving growth hormone, we kind of bypassed a lot of the regulatory mechanisms, thinking we were doing the right thing, and it just didn't work. Yeah. But with the biologics, we're getting a much better response when we're going downstream a little further, and letting the system kind of control itself. So we enhance the system to take it to the youthful levels, but it's, even if we tried to take it to some super physiologic level, the system would resist it.
Yeah. I want to talk about mitochondria a little bit.
Okay.
As far in this context of anti-aging, longevity, or promoting health span, I know there's some connection between growth hormone and mitochondria. And so there might be some connection between the secretagogues, these growth hormones, secretagogues, and mitochondrial function. But mitochondria have a role in this process of longevity and increased health span. Can you talk a bit about what that role is, and then maybe any specific peptides, whether the growth hormones, secretagogues, or other peptides that may help promote increased mitochondrial function?
Yeah, again, this is a double-edged sword, as is everything in biology. And that's why we have to start looking at things from a full systems-based approach and not from an isolated approach. Just to give you an example, I mean, there's a lot of criticism right now that taking metformin is actually toxic to mitochondria. So everybody's like, oh, you know, we shouldn't be taking it because it's toxic to mitochondria. But you can't take these isolated microscopic views of one aspect of what's happening. You know, pull back the microscope and look at all aspects and say, you know, does this input create a positive change in the system, and does the negative aspects get outweighed by the positive? You've got to do this with everything that we do in the human system, and don't look at things as, okay, well, this one's natural, this one's synthetic, whatever. I don't care about that. I care about, you know, we're a human system. We have an input. It doesn't matter if it comes from a plant. It doesn't matter if it's made in the lab. It's an input to the system that we're looking at a response. And with mitochondria, it's very much double-edged, because you can really focus on things that increase mitochondrial biogenesis, and this is creating more mitochondria. And this is a great thing. You know, you turn over more mitochondria, you create more in there, you have great metabolism, you know, you're burning fat, all of this stuff, but you're also creating a ton of free radicals with that. So if you're going to upgrade the mitochondrial biogenesis, you've also got to upgrade the ability of the body to mitigate those free radicals through like the glutathione system or something similar to that. So it's not a matter of just focusing on, oh, let's create mitochondrial biogenesis. You know, it's the same approach that Neurohacker took when they were developing a nootropic. It's great that you can turn the entire brain on with something that's a stimulant. But if you're not supplying raw materials for that process to keep going, if you're not increasing blood supply to the brain, I mean, you're talking about 20% of your metabolism and you're all of a sudden cranking it up with some stimulant. You've got to be able to mitigate that process in a way that you're feeding the raw materials in that it's going to need to keep running. And then you're also creating a ton of free radicals in the brain. You're creating tons of neuroinflammation when you upgrade the brain like that. So you've got to have ways that you enhance the body's system of mitigating that. Same thing with
stimulants specifically, as far as neuroinflammation, or
any of the nootropics. I mean, anything that you're looking at that's going to upregulate performance in the brain. I mean, you really need to take a look at this and say, okay, if I'm going to do this, these are the consequences of it, and how can I mitigate that to make the net outcome a very positive for me?
Yeah, but just one point I'm curious about. So a lot of some of the natural herbs that, for example, stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, like for example, let's say curcumin or cacao extract, or like EGCG from green tea or something like that.
Yeah,
they act on the PGC1 alpha, mitochondrial biogenesis pathway, but they also act on the NRF2 pathway to upregulate the internal antioxidant defense system at the same time. So isn't that right? Sort of, they're increasing biogenesis, but they're also helping the cell deal with some of those free radicals, right?
Right. And I love curcumin from that aspect. But you're also talking about a very mild effect versus what we have available now. I mean, there's a new peptide called MOTS-C, MOTS-C. Mm-hmm. And MOTS-C is profound with what it does with mitochondria. It's actually a protein that's coded by a gene in the mitochondria. So the mitochondrial gene will send out a messenger RNA. It'll go to our own ribosome. So, mitochondria are foreign bodies in us. And this interaction is fascinating. So the MOTS-C will code for the protein. It'll go to the ribosomes. It'll be transcribed. Then it goes into our nucleus and upregulates PPARGC1A and mitochondrial biogenesis in a very profound way. I mean, huge. So we've got that. We've also got metformin, which is one of the most potent PPARGC1A upregulators that we have. So we've got a bunch of them that can do this. Curcumin is kind of that mild form of it. So it's something you can take on a daily basis and get positive results, but it's not going to give you exceptional results in that regard. With the precision of these biologics, we can start getting into that. I mean, there's another one called Humanin, which isn't available in the US market yet, but it is, and the MOTS-C also upregulates NRF2 and NRF1 as well. But Humanin is fascinating. I mean, you talk about a longevity protein. People with variants of Humanin have exceptional longevity, and now we're quickly getting ready to release. I know it's going to be coming from one of the pharmacies for sure in the next couple of months, because I know some of the research companies have actually produced it already. But Humanin is going to be a game changer for longevity, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, what can you say a bit more about? Let's talk about Humanin specifically, since you seem more impressed with that one than MOTS-C. So what are the mechanisms as far as how Humanin might work?
Oh, you're hitting me with something that I haven't studied enough on yet. Humanin is actually, so the MOTS-C, they're hitting both aspects of mitochondrial biogenesis and the ability to upregulate the mitigation of the free radical production. So they work in combination with each other. And now you've got me second guessing of which one is which right now. I know that the mitochondrial biogenesis definitely occurs with the MOTS-C, but I think it's more focused on really the mitochondrial biogenesis, whereas the humanin is more along the lines of the NRF2 pathways and the keep genes. So
Mhm.
I think the humanin is the one that we know for sure is associated with longevity based on genetic studies.
Mhm.
MUT-C is fairly new from genetic studies, but we don't have anything that tells us anything about variants of it. But we have seen athletic performance, VO2 max increases with MUT-C that have been pretty impressive.
Gotcha. Another quick digression on this mitochondrial topic. Are you familiar with compounds? I know they're not technically peptides, but there's a couple of compounds. One's called cardarin. It's GW. I forget the numbers.
501, 516, yeah.
And then there's also SR9009.
Right.
Do you know if those have, maybe some comparable effects to MOTS-C or humanin or?
Yeah, I mean, GW 501, 516 is pretty impressive with its ability to really upgrade VO2 max performance. I actually tracked my VO2 max while I was on GW 501, 516. And I was on it for about 2 months, and my VO2 max went up about 6 points based on my tracking with this, and I could tell the performance increase with it. And I have pretty average on VO2 max as it is, so it was great for me to experience that with it. Now, again, it's a research peptide, and you can't recommend anybody to take this. The SR9009, and it's a PPAR-GC1A, or it's a PPAR-GC1A activator. The SR9009 is showing better results overall, but the problem is the studies are in rats that were given intraperitoneal injections, and it's a very, very short half-life. And so a lot of people have been going with the SR9009, but I don't see a point in it. We don't have any evidence that SR9009 is going to be available when you take it orally and have any effect at all from that regard. So I'm kind of standing back and waiting to see what happens with the SR9009 for sure.
Gotcha. Any other topics, any other peptides worth mentioning around this topic of longevity?
Well, I mean, all of them have some aspect of longevity associated with them. And these are really upregulating systems in the body. I mean, just like in the brain peptides, you have ones that mitigate neuroinflammation. So you're talking about really great longevity aspects. You're talking about some of these will increase dendritic growth in profound ways, and they're used in clinical trials for traumatic brain injury recovery, stroke recovery, people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. So, they're not directly saying, okay, well, this is a longevity peptide by itself, but brain health is a part of longevity, and I think these peptides play a role in that regard.
Do some of them have some evidence around preventing or treating neurodegenerative diseases?
They do. There are a lot of clinical trials going on right now with several of them. Cerebrolysin. Cerebrolysin is a mix. It's an extract from pig brain, and it's got BDNF, GDNF, CNTF, and NGF. So I'm giving you all these acronyms, but there's basically like brain-derived neurotrophic factor, nerve growth factor, ciliary neurotrophic factor. These are all things that create neuroprotection, they create neurohealth, they reduce neuroinflammation. This one's been used in some clinical trials in Europe in degenerative brain issues, as well as post-recovery from stroke and some of the traumatic brain injuries. So it's probably the one with the most research behind it right now. It is available by prescription from compounding pharmacies here in the US. It is not on the pharmaceutical market per se, but it can be prescribed. And it's an injection that people do for a certain period of time and see pretty profound effects with it.
Yeah. Now I know there's a couple others. One's called CMAX, and there's one called C-Lank. And then there's also one you mentioned that I hadn't heard of before. I think it's called Dihexa or something like that.
Yeah. CMAX, I get mixed results with CMAX. I mean, typically, if a client's using CMAX by itself, I see about half of them say they've experienced something. Now, if they're taking a baseline nootropic and then they use the Cmax on top of that, I do see kind of a very positive cognitive kick for them. Cell Link is used mostly for anxiety and depression. So we've seen really good results with Cell Link in people with generalized anxiety disorder. And again, you have to use caution with this because Cell Link takes several days for most people to start working, and they give up after they don't get a result after one, and it's a nasal spray. So they tend to give up, but 60% of people are slow responders. So they have to do it for a while before that really kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
Cmax, you're either going to notice it or you don't. It's kind of like putting nitrous on a car. I mean, you can really get some great productivity and improve learning and memory during the time that you're on it, but it's short-lived. It's about 4 hours that I've seen that the positive results kind of kick in.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this other one, dihexa, that you mentioned before.
Yeah, dihexa is fascinating. This was the one developed out of the University of Washington, and this is only a 6 amino acid peptide. So they've actually just recently come out with an oral form of it. And what we've been using prior to that was a topical cream, but it can absorb, get into the system. And now this is the fascinating part. So we know the importance of BDNF. You take some Bacopa, you take some holy basil, you can increase BDNF in the brain. It's always a great thing because BDNF is kind of adaptogenic for the stress system. It's great for learning and memory. But the big thing is it causes new dendrites to grow. So it causes neurogenesis. Now, dihexa was found to be 7 orders of magnitude stronger than BDNF in dendritic growth in the brain. Now, to get your head around this is 7 orders of magnitude. This isn't 7 times stronger. This is like 10 million times stronger than BDNF. And the animal studies on this, they showed you can look at the slides on the dendrite growth with it, and it's profound. So they're currently looking at some clinical trials with dihexa in the realm of neurodegenerative diseases, even in looking at it in spinal cord injuries, looking at it in multiple sclerosis. And that's why this company is trying to really patent this thing because it's got great potential for it. But right now it's available in the form that they first discovered it in.
Gotcha. So are those the main ones worth mentioning when it comes to issues related to the brain and nervous system? Any other things related to?
Another one that I've been pretty impressed with is, and it's not really a peptide per se. It's peptide-like, but it's RG3, which is it's a ginsenoside derivative, and it's a nasal spray. And the company we use, or the pharmacy we use, they combine it with a little NAD and a little methyl B12. But this nasal spray is really potent. I find that RG3 gives me more energy and productivity and focus than the Cmax did. So I've been really impressed with the effects I've been getting with the RG3 for sure.
Okay, quick digression based on something you just said. The NAD plus, so this is in nasal spray. I'm curious. There seems to be some controversy around whether NAD can actually be absorbed exogenously, or if it's better to deliver nicotinamide riboside or mononucleotide, or
honestly, I don't pay attention to the NAD or the B12 that's in the nasal spray. I don't think
the ginsenosides.
Yeah, it's the ginsenosides. I mean, here's the profound thing. So they looked at PPAR-GC1A with this RG3, and they found that when comparing it to exercise, the PPAR-GC1A protein levels were almost equivalent to an exercise session when you did RG3. Now, on top of that, they saw upregulation of NRF2 to greater levels than exercise created. They saw superoxide dismutase as well as catalase go up to higher levels than exercise created. Now, that looks great, but then they also looked at relative messenger RNA levels of NRF1 and TFAM, which, what we're talking about is AMPK activations and mTOR and everything like that. So they actually saw those hit almost the same levels of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a nasal spray that was creating a physiologic effect from a mitochondrial and DNA level of exercise.
Interesting. And that might, for people listening to this podcast, might potentially translate into increased energy levels if you're improving mitochondrial function.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So other topics within this category of peptides, autoimmunity, I know is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any, and actually maybe this could be addressed either with or separately from cancer related peptides. So I'll let you kind of decide if you want to treat those separately or together. I don't know exactly the mechanisms of how they're working, but can you talk a bit about peptides as it relates to immune health? And actually one more nuance to this that some people in my audience struggle with is chronic infections. That can be a potential cause of severe chronic fatigue for some people. Do you know of any peptides that might play a role in helping people with chronic infections as well?
Yeah, we use several peptides in that regard. So mostly dealing with people that progress to the chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So we deal with people reaching out to us that have chronic Lyme, chronic mold issues, and we look at their genetics. And a lot of people carry genetics that just doesn't allow them to get rid of the mold toxin very well. And what's really cool about the peptides is, one of the net effects of chronic inflammatory response syndrome is severe suppression of alpha MSH in the brain. And that cascades down to immune system, sexual function, and libido, energy levels. So it creates this just massive dump of just feeling terrible. And one of the cool peptides is melanotan-2, which people will call the Barbie drug. You take it people take it for tanning. So it's alpha MSH is essentially what it is. So it's a melanocyte stimulator. And in chronic inflammatory response syndrome, it mitigates the symptoms like crazy.
Really?
Amazing. I mean, a low dose of that on a daily basis has really had dramatic effects for people in utilizing that. And another one is VIP nasal spray. VIP nasal spray works really well in that regard. VIP, though, is more protective against that chronic inflammatory response progressing to an autoimmune disease, because as you go down that cascade, you're more prone to develop autoimmunity in that. And the VIP nasal spray, while you're healing, will kind of prevent that from happening. But you have to really monitor when you're using the VIP nasal spray, because there's some side effects with that blood pressure drops and things like that. Mm-hmm. But one of the other ones that I found, so these are mitigating symptoms, so they're not really treating anything. One of the peptides that's worked really well for treating is thymosin alpha. Thymosin alpha has had profound effects with resetting the immune system in autoimmune people, upregulating the immune system. It's kind of cool. So what it does is it kind of makes damaged cells or infected cells more visible to the immune system. So a lot of the times when an infection gets into a cell, like in Lyme, or if you're talking about a cancer cell or something like that, one of the things that these organisms or these processes occur is they try to hide from the immune system. And so thymosin alpha, for some reason, it resets the system so that all the markers on the surface that tell the immune system that, hey, this cell, there's something wrong with this cell, they start expressing with the thymosin alpha. So I was talking I did a consult for a client the other day, and this was just completely off the cuff. The guy had 6 years of prostate cancer, and they'd been monitoring his PSA levels, and he'd gotten up to 15, and then did a course of thymosin alpha, and his PSA levels dropped to 2.
Wow.
Just from I don't know if it's from the thymosin alpha, but the correlation with the timing of that was impressive. Mm-hmm. And did it actually cause the cancer cells to be more visible to the immune system? I don't know, but that's one of the theories behind how that works.
Interesting. Now, would something like that potentially be detrimental for somebody with autoimmune disease, where the immune system is already kind of a little too aggressive and attacking some of the person's own body parts, let's say, Hashimoto's, where the immune system is attacking the thyroid gland?
Yeah, and I don't deal a lot with too many people with autoimmunity, but I know several docs that do, and they have anecdotally told me that it really works well in those situations, just because of the fact that, in autoimmunity, you don't have it's not like, okay, well, if you improve the immune system, it's going to make it worse because they're going to attack. In autoimmunity, you have a dysregulated immune system. And so thymosin alpha kind of resets that and gives you the balance, is the theory behind what's happening with it.
Interesting. Any other peptides worth mentioning here as far as immune health, anti-cancer effects?
There's a ton of them. PNC27 for cancer. I mean, I think that one's the one that really targets the P53 pathway. And then you've got LL37, which isn't quite available yet. We've been waiting for it to come on. We've been told that it's going to come on the market. It's really good for the immune system as well. Let's see, we just wait. We hear about these things coming onto the market, and we just wait for the pharmacy to say, okay, we've got it in. We're ready to go with it. And we try them out and see what kind of responses we get. But it's an exciting area to be in right now. Staying up to date on the peptides is hard because they change so quickly, and new data comes out almost on a daily basis with them.
Yeah. Are there any other classes or peptides that you want to mention that you think would be useful for people to know about?
Well, I know one of my docs from my Austin clinic is going to be on, and he's going to be talking about weight loss peptides and
yes,
healing peptides. So I'll leave those open for him to discuss.
Okay, excellent. To kind of wrap up, I'm a couple questions. So one, I'm curious to hear what specific peptides are your personal favorites of the ones that you've experimented with. What have you personally found to give you the best results, or what are things that you continue to use because you really get benefits from them?
Well, the growth hormone releasing hormones, and usually I combine that with a ghrelin mimetic. So I like the CJC with ipamorelin. I've also done courses of tesamorelin, which have been pretty effective as well. I actually go with the CJC because I don't have to mix it every single night. It's just more of a convenience thing for me. But tesamorelin is actually much more potent. The other one is the MOTS-C, which seems to give pretty impressive results. I do like the Epitalon, something I do regularly. Every 6 months, I do a course of that. BPC 157 by far is my favorite, and Dr. Bob will be talking to you more about that one. But that one is huge. I mean, you talk about something that heals the gut. I mean, I do nothing for gut healing anymore. No probiotics, no supplementation aspects, nothing like that. You get them eating a healthy diet, you put them on BPC, and the gut heals. It's just amazing how effective that is. And for any injuries or keeping you from getting injured, BPC is just absolutely wonderful in that regard.
Yeah, I'm curious on that note. I know this is a bit of a digression, and we'll probably talk more about it with Dr. Bob Harding from your institute. But have you seen Dr. William Seed's BPC product that's being sold as a nutritional supplement? I'm just curious if that's legitimate or.
It's not BPC 157.
Okay. Do you know what it is exactly?
It's apparently, so BPC is produced in the stomach, and it's a fairly long compound, and BPC 157 is a short segment of it that is stable in the digestive tract. There are tons of studies on BPC 157, so a lot of clinical trials, both in human and animal model, and there are 0 studies on body protective complex or compound. Can't remember what he calls it. But it's amazing because Seeds is brilliant with the peptides, but I have no confidence in that product.
Gotcha. So to kind of wrap up, I'm sure that there are people listening to this, probably a sizable segment of the listeners here, that are probably overwhelmed with all of the mechanisms and all of this whole language of peptides, BPC157 and MOTC and humanin and Silank and Simax and, all the rest, dihexa and all the rest of these. If someone has, let's say, just a desire to increase their overall level of energy and mood and well-being and just function and perform better, where would you say they kind of start? So right now they're in overwhelm with this whole vast territory of all these different options. What do you think would be the highest priority to start with?
Get somebody who knows what they're doing with this stuff from a complete complex system lifestyle standpoint. People think that they're experts in their own health. I mean, Dr. Google is the busiest doctor in the world right now. And the problem is you don't know what you're getting that's real. I mean, I don't do my own taxes because I know I will screw them up. People don't need to be being in charge of their own health. They need to find somebody they trust as a coach that can give them the guidance and the inputs that they need and the objective feedback on this. But you just got to find somebody who does it. I mean, when we work with clients, I mean, we don't even put them on something unless we tell them exactly why we're putting them on it and what we're measuring to see if it's actually doing what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
We have all of our clients wearing these biometric monitors. Every one of our clients has this, and I creep on their stuff every month. I'm on a video call with them. I'm like, okay, let's pull up your dashboard. I look at their sleep, their stress, their resting heart rates, all this stuff, so that I can see what's actually happening in their system on a day-to-day basis. And any intervention we do, we have a way to measure whether it's doing what it's supposed to do. That's what you need with a coach. And there's plenty of coaches out there. I mean, we've trained 250 coaches worldwide in this model in our academy. And some are physicians, some are chiropractors, some are health coaches. So there's a wide variety of them out there that are kind of trained in our model, but you really just need to find somebody that can look at this from a system standpoint and say, this is what we're dealing with.
Gotcha. So two things. One is, if somebody wants to be trained in your model, where should they look to? Where should they sort of reach out to you, or how can they find out more information about that?
That would be at Apiron.academy. That's APEIRON.academy. We have 90 hours of online clinical training in genetics, epigenetics, and systems-based approaches. And we also have a peptide course. It's a 6-hour course just in learning peptides for clinicians out there that want to have a greater knowledge in that, or coaches. So.
Excellent. And now, if somebody also wants to work with you directly, one-on-one, or the physicians who work under you, where should they reach out to you to get in contact and find out more information?
That would be apironcenter.com. So APEIRON center.com. That's our medical center. And we have offices in Austin, Asheville, getting ready to open Sarasota, and getting ready to open London this summer. So got a lot coming online.
Excellent. Now, do you want to just say a quick few words about what your sort of ideal client or patient is, and the kind of work that you like to do with the people you work with?
Yeah, I look for growth-oriented people. I mean, I turn down probably half the people that reach out to work with me just because they are stuck in a story of I'm sick and this is my story. We don't look at anybody as sick. We don't have a paradigm of illness. We look at a continuum of unbalanced, homeostasis, optimized, and enhanced. And you can enter into that process anywhere along there, as long as the mindset is really growth oriented. And, I am not a cheerleader. I am not a mentor. A cheerleader will basically not call you out on your shit. A mentor will teach you their path. I'm a coach, and I give people that coaching guidance to get them along their own path.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Stickler, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your time. And again, people can reach out to you at apironcenter.com to work one-on-one.
Or you could say Ape Iron Center. That's easy to remember how it's spelled. But
yes. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this, and I hope to connect with you again, maybe for a future podcast where we can talk more about genetics and epigenetics.
That'd be great.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Hey there, this is Ari again. One more quick thing before you go. Just make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Energy Blueprint, and also make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and I will see you again next week.